I'm Rachel Armentano. I am going to be teaching you how to make this really cool painting using only some tracers that you make from a cereal box, marker, and water and a paintbrush. So I have a piece of I have watercolor paper, but any kind of paper that you know can absorb paint or watercolor will work with this. So you might just want to test a corner of it if you're not sure if it comes from a sketchbook pad or something, and make sure that if you color with marker and then you add water, it will still work. So I cut mine to fit in this little matte frame that I have here, because I'm going to end up framing that at the end. So you might want to check what size you have. But anything that is 4x6 or 5x7 or 8x10 will work in a standard frame. So the first thing that I'm going to do is take any granola box, cereal box, whatever you have, and I'm going to actually just cut some shapes out of it. I call these tracers, stencils. I just made a diamond shape and a semicircle shape. And what I'm going to do on here is just trace this with my Sharpie first. So I'm going to trace a bunch of times, holding it still. This is great practice for young kids. And most kids just love using tracers in general. You don't have to make a picture out of it, you know, like with tangrams, it doesn't have to make a picture. You're just tracing it a certain number of times. This would be a great way to practice counting as well. If you say, okay, let's make 5 semicircles, or have a checklist for every time that they trace a circle shape or a square shape or a triangle shape. So I'm gonna trace this a couple times, and then I'm gonna trace my diamond. I'm having some go off the page and some are on and some are overlapping. You'll notice underneath me is my underneath paper. I actually made that from a grocery bag. I use grocery bags for a lot of things. I have a video showing you how to cut it down so you can get it into a whole table size piece of underneath paper, but it's really durable and it catches all the paint and the mess. So I'm just tracing mine. I'm gonna do 2 more diamonds. And if my daughter was in here, I'd say, okay, how many total do we have? Now I'm just going to finish this up. I have my first shapes. Step 2 is that I'm going to add marker. I'm just using regular Crayola markers, whatever you have. The trick here is that you take colors from one side of the color wheel. So you want to find colors that are similar. If you do every single color, they may end up mixing together. Some kids might want to do rainbow though, and that's okay. I'm using blues, teals, greens, and a little bit of purple. So I'm going to do the same thing I just did with my tracers, with my Sharpies. So I'm going to just trace, and I might have these overlap now with my marker. And I'm going to do this a bunch of times. So the more marker I can get on here, the more paint it's going to make, because we're actually going to turn this watercolor based marker into watercolor. Because inside the markers, for every time you've had a kid kind of take it apart and then be holding that gross tube in their hand, it actually has watercolor inside of it. So I'm going to keep going. I'm going to switch to my semicircle, and you could absolutely have a whole bunch of tracers. And maybe you want to add a little bit more on. So you might want to add some designs or some little areas of color, and you can absolutely do that as well. I'm going to add on just some zigzags, kind of floating around my picture to bring it all together with one of my skinny markers. I'm going to do just one more as well, just to make sure I have a good amount of color on there. So I'm going to do a fat zigzag, or a big one. And my last last step is going to be just to get some water. So I have a paintbrush and water. I'm now going to turn this into paint. So I'm going to paint right on the marker. And right when I paint on the marker, it's going to start to bleed, which may have happened to you before when you were carrying one of your kids' projects out in the rain, or if you were a kid watching this when you were carrying your picture home from school and all of a sudden it started raining on your picture and it started to have dots. That's because the water was hitting the marker and it was activating it again. So right now, this is actually turning this into paint. Now, I can go crazy and paint everywhere, or I can even paint around some of my shapes and leave it open. If your paper starts to curl as you're painting it, just flip it over and brush a little bit of water on the back and it will flatten because it's gonna make it curl in the opposite direction. So I could keep painting, or I could leave some of it white like I have there. I'm gonna paint mine in. And some markers bleed a lot and some don't bleed at all. Another cool thing you could add on to this is if you have crayons, you just draw a few crayon lines and those crayon lines will actually show through. And they create a magical thing called a resist because the crayon pushes away the paint. And I actually do that in my video making line designs using the grocery bag. So that's a great place to learn that. So I would take my painting and now if I put it right in my frame, I have a cool